Hey everybody, I'm Dr. Alyssa Watson.
And I'm Dr. Beth Molleson.
Thanks so much for joining us in the Veterinary Breakroom. In the Veterinary Breakroom, Dr. Beth and I have short conversations where we chat informally about relevant topics in veterinary medicine. And today we are going to talk about something that can sometimes be a pain point in clinics, and that is when you have an ER contact for a client, a way to reach them, and then that client doesn't actually answer the phone, or you're not able to get a hold of them in an emergency situation. And I think we do want to preface this episode, right, Dr. Beth, by saying that the goal of this episode isn't necessarily to solve this problem, but to talk about, the frustrations that it can bring up, as well as some solutions that we've seen in the past, but also why those solutions aren't always going to work.
Yeah, I think you're right, Alyssa. I think this is a true break room where just like in the vet break room, just a little vent session. So everyone just discussing an issue that I think a lot of us have dealt with, and what your clinic and my clinic, Alyssa, does to kind of help this not be an issue. So like you said, it's kind of that situation where a pet gets dropped off. And then what? We don't necessarily have a straight line of contact to the owner anymore. This pet is our responsibility, and just all the things that can, I don't necessarily want to say go wrong, but all the twists and turns that can take when emergency situations come up or extractions are needed during a dental procedure or things like that. So Alyssa, in your career, has this ever been an issue? Can you think of any times where specifically you have kind of been left hanging by a pet owner?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the classic one is the one that you just mentioned, the dental extractions. But because that happens so frequently, I think that is certainly a situation where clinics have developed more defined strategies on how to handle that, because it's something that is a little bit more predictable. Where I have run into trouble is the very, very unpredictable things. For instance, I had one time in my career, I had someone drop off their pet for routine lab work. The pet needed blood and urine obtained. And so it was a dog with known congestive heart failure that was on medication, on PIMO, things like that. And the owner was bringing it in for what they had scheduled as routine lab work, a complete blood count, a chemistry, and a urinalysis, and I think a blood pressure. And they dropped it off. They left the building. Then the receptionist or the technician brought the animal into the back. And when the animal came into the back, it was clearly in distress. It had an elevated respiratory rate. It had a dusky mucous membranes. It was in distress, and I could not get a hold of these people. The very first thing I did is called them and told them, you need to come back. We need to put your pet on oxygen, all of these things. And that was a very distressing situation for my staff, for me, for the pet. We ended up trying to stabilize the pet, but ultimately we're not able to. And so that is just one example of a situation where this becomes really important if you can, get a hold of an owner or not get a hold of an owner. How about you? Any stories for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I work at a clinic where we see a lot of drop-off patients. And so, of course, that just gives more opportunity for trouble. And so the first one, I mean, I think we both have said, that dental extraction issue, I think in my career has been the biggest one, where you are, or any procedure where you're entering a situation where you don't know what you're going to find, and you have to have joint decision-making process with the pet owner. And they may or may not kind of understand the importance of that when they drop their pet off and how accessible they need to be. The one that came to my mind when we were discussing this topic it was really just a classic example of how things can go wrong in any situation, no matter how hard you try. This was a patient, we had an emergency amputation come in that morning. And we, of course, already had a booked procedure schedule. And so as I'm doing this amputation, I asked my staff, can you please call these other pet owners and tell them, unfortunately, we're going to have to cancel their routine dental cleanings. And so my staff did. There was one particular pug that they were calling over and over again and couldn't get a hold of the pet owner. And she eventually called us back later that day, irate that she hadn't been kept informed. I guess the phone number we had on file wasn't the most up-to-date one, or she didn't have the phone available, or it was a spouse or whatever. And she was irate because she said her dog was a rescue dog and it just traumatized him. Her impression was that it would completely traumatize him to have been in a cage all day. So yeah, that's just the most traumatic one that comes to mind because of how angry this lady was. But yeah, I think it does happen a lot. And like you said, I do think there are some potential solutions, but I just don't think anything is foolproof. So Alyssa, in your experience, what have your clinics done? And we asked this question on Facebook too, so we'll share the strategies we were seeing. But what do you think are some of the attempted solutions for these drop-off patients?
The most universal solution that I've seen is some sort of line in their consent form, especially anesthetic consent. But I am a big proponent of any time an animal is dropped off, probably because of my experiences, they need a consent form that clearly outlines who's there, how long they're there. I've had, in 21 years of practice, I've had a couple times where people just didn't show up to pick up their animal.
Same.
And, we need to be very clear that this animal is now left overnight without care. There's no one in the building. And so the staff thinks I'm a little bit neurotic about it, but that has got to be signed every single time. Mm-hmm. And I think it needs to be verbally pointed out to people too. Like, we're here till 6. Mm-hmm. There's nobody here in the building. If you don't come back to pick up your animal, that's your responsibility, or we need to be able to reach you. And then for things like the dental extractions, certainly I've seen, a variation of answers, the same way with kind of CPR and things like that. Do you want us to do CPR? Do you not want us to do CPR? If you can't get a hold of me, do you don't do anything, like nothing extra. B, go ahead and proceed, but cap out at a certain dollar amount, or, C, do anything, and no matter how much it costs, and I promise to pay for it. Right. One of the questions I've always wondered is, how do those stand up?
Right. I don't know the answer to that, but I have wondered that myself. Because I think, again, to be the real naysayer here, I think all of those are great solutions for the vast majority of issues that would arise. But I know I have seen cases where, because that's what the clinic I work in does, is particularly for dental cleanings, there's a form that says, this is my phone number where I can be reached. This is the amount I am willing to spend, or that I want to spend, or, do nothing unless you speak to me. We have all those options. But I've certainly, the real world hits and that form doesn't get filled out. Even a lot of times we'll have it given to the pet owner, and they will either, only fill in the phone number portion, or call me as the maximum amount, or, things like that just don't always get caught when you're operating in a nice, busy clinic like most of us do. So that certainly is one hurdle. And I'm just thinking of another story. I remember having somebody wrote maximum $500. And so we called because their pet had more than $500 worth of issues, and they didn't answer. So, we wound up having to leave some of the recommended extractions, and then they called back irate that we hadn't, I think they understood to some degree, but we had not addressed all of that pet's issues. And apparently to them, they thought the maximum number that any dental work could ever be would be $500. They kind of thought they were putting an unlimited ungodly amount of money in that space. And so again, even with the best of intentions, I know we have all faced this situation. I think the other things that I have run into is, like, it's the husband that drops off, and the husband's a decision maker, but he knows he's going to be in meetings all day. So he leaves his wife's number, and then you call the wife's number. She either doesn't know what to do or okay something where then the primary owner didn't approve it. And it's just, just can go wrong.
Yeah, there's so many places communication can break down or things. When you were telling that story, it reminded me of we used to do a lot of work with a particular rescue, and the decision maker at the rescue was a texter. She always wanted text. She never wanted to be called. She never went, which was fine. That's great. And so she had brought a dog in and dropped it off, and it had been in a little tussle with another dog, and there was a laceration, and the dog wasn't neutered yet. So I texted her and said, here's the estimate for the laceration repair. Do you want me to neuter him at the same time? That would be this amount. And she texted me back an angry faced emoji. And I was like, and so I'm like, I'm going to need a yes or no, because angry face emoji tells me nothing.
I was to say, I wonder how emojis hold up in court.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Talk about a communication breakdown. And I think some people just don't keep their phones on them. Like, I always say that I'm pretty sure if I had gone into labor while my husband was at work, he would have missed the whole birth of my child, because he just is not a phone. He's not a phone checker, even when encouraged to be.
Yep. Yeah, I'll have to throw my husband under the bus there too. He is absolutely somebody that even if we're expecting something, we're expecting a service, call at the house for the cable or for a plumbing issue that we need. We know someone is coming over, and he still doesn't turn his ringer on or anything, which is why I'm always like, don't give them your number, give them my number. You're never going to answer the phone. So it's a real struggle with other things. You would hope that if you had a very ill animal or an animal, in the clinic that is undergoing a procedure, that you might be a little bit more heightened. But I understand that you can't always get a hold of people when they're at work. And there are certainly, constraints that we all have, limitations that we all have with working hours and things like that. And so I certainly don't want to make it sound like all clients are horrible for not answering their phone. That's not the case, but just what are some of the things that we can do to mitigate those, with the same understanding that we're not going to come up with every single scenario, and that's something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, even, certainly I've had situations where, to me, that's the other thing too, that lack of communication isn't always just about finances. And like your first example, where of course the true health of the pet was at stake. I know I've had situations arise where the pet owner maybe knew they weren't going to be reachable, and so said to do whatever was needed for their pet. And then, say it's a lower canine extraction on a Yorkie, and I really want to counsel that owner on the potential of a mandibular fracture, but I can't. Like those situations are really tough and really frustrating. And I think this issue for me gets back to just the fact that being a vet is really hard and really stressful on a daily basis. There's all these little stressors and situations that can cause your day to go from smooth to stressful very quickly.
Yeah. Yep. I think that is the bottom line. And also just keeping in mind with this that, like we said, you're not going to come up with every scenario. And there's going to be a time when you get a curveball thrown at you, and what you have chosen to do is not what the owner or client was expecting or thought was the best choice. And what we need to do is just go ahead and say, we made the best decision we could with the information we had at the time, and move forward and give yourself grace and allow yourself to not take on that anger or guilt or whatever the client is trying to push on you. Because at the end of the day, this is a two-way thing. If you try your best to get a hold of them and they were not able you were not able to get in contact with them for whatever reason, somebody cut down the satellite tree outside the clinic and you suddenly have no phone service, then those things are out of your control. And we all have to realize that stuff like that is unfortunately going to happen once in a while.
Yep, absolutely. I think for whatever reason, when those lines of communication are strained, which just by default happens when a pet owner or a pet is dropped off, there are sometimes going to be tough decisions where you can't make everyone happy. It almost reminds me of, we've had snow days here lately, and it reminds me of those poor people making the decision on whether or not to cancel school, because no matter what, they'll post it on their Facebook page. No matter what the decision is, you then see like 20 comments about how it was the wrong decision and how could you, and of course, and then the other 20 people feel the exact opposite. So Anyway, just one of those things in life. Like you said, Alyssa, I think it's smart to not internalize the frustration and just do what you have to do in some of those situations.
Yep. Well, I think that might potentially lead in very well to our win of the week, because I have an idea of what your win of the week might be.
I don't know how you would know, Alyssa, just because I've been on cloud nine all day because my kids are back at school. So yeah, we got hit. I'm in Cincinnati. We got hit with, in my backyard, it was 12.5 inches of snow, which we are not well equipped for. And so school was canceled for 2 days because of the snow. And then yesterday it was canceled because of the cold weather, which was particularly concerning because it's going to be just as cold for maybe the next 10 days. But I guess today they decided, we can't be off for the next 10 days. And these snow days were also coming off of the 2-week holiday break. So to say that I am thrilled to have a day with the children at school is an understatement. You're right. That's the win of the month for me. So what about you, Alyssa? I know you are in sunny Vegas, so I suspect your win's going to be different.
Yes, and my win is not snow related. So I'm going to try to keep it on theme just slightly, though. My win is actually, and I know you knew about this, Beth, because I vented to you about it when it was going on. About a few weeks ago now, I started having issues with the messaging system from my in-home hospice and euthanasia service. Generally, anytime somebody makes an appointment or cancels an appointment or changes anything, the software that we use for that sends an email to me, but also sends a text message to my phone, because oftentimes I'm out, and those text messages are integral in me knowing what's going on with my day, because the nature of that job is very fluid. People will make appointments and an hour later they will realize that they're not ready and they'll cancel appointments, or they'll make an appointment and realize that's too far. They don't want to sit around all day waiting. And so you have to be very comfortable with your schedule changing rapidly. But that's really hard to do if I don't get a notification. And these notifications, it was so bad because sometimes they were not coming through at all, but other times they were coming through like 13 or 14 hours later. And so it would pop up like this client canceled. And then it turned out like that was an appointment from yesterday. And it was completely messing with me, and I couldn't figure out why. I called, our service, the IT person. I called my phone carrier. The IT person at work was blaming it on the phone carrier. Verizon said it wasn't them. It was just a mess, and nobody could figure out how to fix it. And then it just magically fixed itself about a week ago. So I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed that is going to stick, because that had been a nightmare.
Yeah, that's right on theme. Talk about like any crinkle in communication, just throwing everything off. So I'm very happy for you, because I have also, I can't remember the specifics, but been in a situation where like the phone carrier is blaming the phone and the phone people are blaming the carrier, and technology. Well, good. I'm glad you're back in business.
I am. Thank you. Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to Break Room this week. I don't know if we gave you any kind of solutions, but hopefully we gave you a little bit of a reassurance that you're not alone out there and that these things happen to other people too.
Absolutely. Not always easy in the clinic. So thanks everyone for listening in. We will catch you next time.
Thanks for joining us in the Veterinary Breakroom. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including a video version on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review us. You can also listen to or watch our podcast episodes on our website at cliniciansbrief.com/podcasts, or drop us a line at podcasts@vetmedics.com. Veterinary Breakroom is a VetMedics production produced by Alexis Ussery and co-hosted by me, Dr. Alyssa Watson, and Dr. Beth Molleson.